Thanks for joining us at the Clive Barker Podcast. In episode 321, Jose and Ryan discuss the 1979 Dog Company play Nightlives, which is available to buy at the Clive Barker Archive. This episode does contain some spoilers, and if you don't mind, please continue ahead. It's a short play, and so it was tough to discuss it without getting into some spoiler territory. All right, welcome. This is episode 321 of the Clive Barker Podcast. Good afternoon, Jose.
Hi, Ryan. How are you doing today?
Good. It's 321. We're talking about the Playbook Nightlives, which this was my first time ever reading this, right? Because this is previously unpublished. Right.
Nightlives, the play by the Dog Company. The Clive Barker Archive has been putting out these lovely Clive Barker play scripts. They put out Nightlives and Frankenstein in Love. And I read this one, I read half of it this week, and then I read the other half this morning. So this reads pretty quickly. It's a very densely packed book, but it's got a lot of pictures at the end, as usual. So I had a lot of fun. It was pretty fast to read. It's very much just like dialogue happening. There's a fight sequence at the end, but I really like the structure of it.
The Dog Company performed this play from 1979 into the beginning of 1980. Interestingly, Clive Barker and Doug Bradley play identical-looking people, like doppelganger twins. It's not really made quite clear, but going into it, it's interesting. They don't tell you who plays what character until the end of the book. So if you flip forward to the end, you can picture in your mind who's playing which character. But if you don't know, it kind of it plays into this this theory that they kind of set up throughout the whole play, right? That these two characters are one person who has like a secret nightlife.
Yeah. So in broad strokes, let me just bring up the quick synopsis here. I got the Dark Fantastic here, and on the hardcover version, in page 101, they explain that Nightlives performed several venues, notably on May 14 to 17, 1979, at the New York and Albany, a pub theater on Parkway in Camden. So this was the synopsis in the Dog Company solicitation. Nightlives is a thriller about identical twins, one a major political figure, the other an underworld boss, who meet and exchange lives for one unforgettable evening. Designed in black and white and red, it doesn't say here, but it was also red. The production recreates the style and hard-boiled wit of early gangster films. And like you said, it opens up with kind of a confusing sequence, right? I don't know if we want to get too much into the story so as not to spoil it, but it opens with a couple of women talking, and they're saying that they're talking about a man who cheated on Rambo and how she wants him to be punished for that. So
she enlists her brother to kill this character, Leroy Santana. Yeah, and the interesting part is Rainbow and Michael Cage are brother and sister, and they're played by the same actor, right? They're both played by Pete Atkins.
That's right. They were both played by Pete Atkins, one in drag, the other one with a suit.
Yeah.
And here's something from Shadows in Eden where they're discussing that particular part. Yes, Atkins says, yes, they were talking about Nightlives, says, yes, the beautiful transvestite Rainbow and her psycho brother Michael. And then Barker said, she was her psycho brother Michael. Atkins says, really? I was never sure. And Barker laughs, well, you played both parts.
Yeah.
Atkins. Clive, I thought that was economy, not psychology.
Yeah. And that part is quoted at the end of at the end of this playbook too, in Phil and Sarah's outro or afterward. I mean,
and after that exchange, Doug Bradley laughs and chimes in. It's a little late to discover your motivation now, Pete.
Yeah, well, they said, in Pete's defense, I didn't know that either until I just read that after reading the play.
Yeah. And there's more stuff here that's really cool. If you go to the chapter in Clive Barker's Shadows in Eden called Peter Atkins, A Dog's Tale, it's a great conversation between Phil Rimmer, Oliver Parker, I think, Doug Bradley, Peter Atkins, and Clive Barker. And they talk a lot about the plays of the Dog Company and the mute theater, pantomime theater. So they talk a lot about that. And there's a few more things about Nightlives. They say, Oliver Parker says at one point he saw a rehearsal of the play, and then Atkins says, in which Rainbow had a beard, which I always wanted to keep for the performance, too. And then Barker says, Real Cycle Sluts, a San Francisco transvestite theater group imagery. And then Parker says, I didn't know much about alternative types of theater at the time, so I found it, as I say, extraordinary, but I was also amazed that it pulled together because, well, having seen the dress rehearsal, I remember thinking, and Barker says, what the hell is going to happen tonight? And Parker says, almost, yeah. And Doug Bradley says, I'm not surprised. We'd usually be halfway up ladders building sets 10 minutes before the audience was due in. And then to complete this, Barker says, the curious thing about Dog and Nightlives is that we played both of them at the British Council to audiences of predominantly foreign students. And Bradley says, but they got it. Barker replies, they had a good time. And Mary Roscoe says, responding to the images. And Barker says, I guess. Because, probably they didn't understand English very well because they were foreign students. Yeah. But it's still entertaining to watch a theater piece. But that brings the question here, right? I mean, was Rambo or Delza, that's her real name, was Rambo and Michael Cage the same person? Was Leroy Santana sleeping with his own best friend in drag? So we never know. Yeah, but there's a lot of triangles in this, right? It's a story that has a lot of love triangles that get created and broken, and people,
And so many people tell Philip Vanderberg that he killed Michael Cage that he starts believing after a while. When you're like 3/4 of the way or 2/3 of the way through the play, he starts believing that. I must have this secret life that I don't know and I don't ever remember it. But I must be this guy. Everybody tells me I'm this guy, and I look like him, and everyone's confusing me for him.
Yeah. So people have seen Michael Cage be stabbed by Leroy Santana.
He's stabbed in the back. Yeah.
And since these guys, Santana and Philip, are doppelgangers, a senator apparently saw this happen. I think that's what they mean, but I don't know why a senator would be in the bad part of town. Yeah. But then, there's this thing, right, where Philip's wife and best friend say, hey, someone saw you kill this guy. How did you do that? What's going on? And he's like, me? I'm a goody two shoes. I didn't do anything. You guys are crazy. And then the same thing starts to happen to Santana. Because once Philip is left there in that part of the town because he's angry at his friend and his wife because they say that they're trying to convince him that he killed someone, and he's like, no, I didn't. You guys are crazy. But then he sticks around, and then Santana also shows up, and then Santana's girlfriend shows up, and then they start confusing the both of them together. And at one point, even Santana starts thinking, do I really have? Why are these people calling me Philip? And they start believing that their identities, their personalities are somehow they have a secret life that they don't know about.
Yeah, and this idea that they're the same person, but one of them is like the night version and the other one's the day version. There you start to see some cracks in that, right? Because they have different contents of their pockets. I mean, there's some weird little things like that give you hints. Like Rainbow wants her underwear back that he stuffs full of, that Santana stuffs into his pockets, and then the knife, right? Vanderberg gets the knife back, and but then Rainbow can't. But then Santana can't find it.
That's true. That's interesting, and of course, like you said, it goes to the title, Nightlives. So it's like Philip is the daytime version of this creature that has two faces, and then Santana is the guy that does the nightlife, the crime, all that stuff, the desire. It's funny because at the end of this, in the afterthought and afterward, Clive mentions something about the doppelganger being present in Jung and also Freud. Mm-hmm. And, Jung defines the double as a manifestation of desire, and that kind of goes towards, like you said, the things they have in their pockets. Like Santana carries underwear in his pockets, while Philip, a man of power who's speaks in the Senate, has identity cards and keys to open doors. And so at one point, these items are exchanged in a way, and that's when the idea of switching lives starts getting into the minds of these two sides of the same person.
It's interesting in the afterward, Clive mentions that he didn't like this play, that he doesn't really care for it, and I think that he had said in part because it's not fantastical enough, and also because there's a part where they say it's mentioned casually that they may be like twins separated at birth.
There's some unused dialogue that talked about someone eating a breakfast and having an egg with 2 yolks and some classical like Castor and Pollux kind of symbology, and then that was cut from the play.
Clive's intro from this, I recognized. Did you recognize it? I couldn't remember if it's from one of the other playbooks or if it's from like Forms of Heaven or Incarnations. But it's mostly talking about, when you read the intro, it's mostly, the preface, it's mostly talking about, hey, if you like these plays and you want to make a production, here's who you can get in touch with. And
the author's note at the beginning? Yeah. Isn't this always on every single play script book?
I guess maybe that's what it is, but I couldn't remember if I also recognized it from from Incarnations and Forms of Heaven.
It may very well be.
I liked this play, and I was right there with these characters.
Okay, back. I got the books right here.
With Santana and Vanderberg, I was right there wondering, wanting to find out, hey, are these the same person or are they different people? So I was kind of on the edge of my seat in that respect, wanting to know. And you don't find out until way into the play what the deal is.
Right. They only meet each other at, so there's a few scenes in this.
There's 103 pages in this play, and it's well into it.
I think Philip and Santana only meet on scene 20, which is very close to the end. They find themselves under the same menace. So at first, Philip thinks, I'm fine, I'm innocent. I didn't do this, but then he starts thinking maybe I do have a nightlife. And then once they meet, they're like, oh shit, we both have that one guy who's trying to kill us, and we both look the same because Michael Cage did not die. Leroy Santana stabbed him in the back, and after recovering, he has come back for revenge to defend the honor of his sister Rambeau, or his own honor, depending on whether you believe they're both the same person.
Yeah. And do they know they're the same person? I mean, that's a whole thing. That's a whole subplot that I didn't get at all until I read the afterword. That I just figured it was economy, like what Pete Atkins was saying, that they just same actor,
sure,
save money or whatever.
But Atkins says here in the afterword that, since Rambeau believes that they're different people, then I play them as if they are different people.
Yeah.
So,
that makes sense too. Yeah.
And that's another duality there, right? Another idea that they might be the same person, another kind of cross-dressing doppelganger.
But in this case, like a split personality sort of a thing.
In my reading of the book, I decided to think that they're different people, Michael and Rambeau, or Delza.
That's how I read it.
Because it made more sense to me that Santana would be involved in an intimate relationship with Rambeau. I mean, it could very well be that they're the same person, but at the same time, since he's such a high figure in the world of crime and such a womanizer, I would imagine that it was really different people. Rambeau is sister to Michael.
Yeah. So
that was my interpretation of it.
Yeah, that was how I took it too. I mean, I think that logistically, I think that he would have figured it out.
Of course.
I kept also imagining what were the sets going to be in this play, because they're not described anywhere in the. I mean, except for there's kind of a wall with red on it, I think, where Michael Cage was stabbed, and that's described in the opening. But the scenes are mostly, people go off stage, new people come on, and then people go off stage and people come on. And when I was reading it, I kept thinking it was the same person who would come on stage playing Philip Vanderberg as the person playing Leroy Santana, right?
Yes.
So I kept thinking it was the same actor. And then at the end and the afterward, that's when you realize, no, it's Doug Bradley and Clive Barker, but they just are dressed up to look identical.
Right. So they had those white painted faces. They had a little nose mask with a mustache, and they were both dressed in like a white shirt, black vest, and black pants and shoes.
Yeah.
And Doug Bradley played Philip Vanderberg, and Clive played Leroy Santana, the criminal, the master of the zone of the city that he controls. He controls the brothels, he controls the pimps, he controls all that stuff.
Do you think this was supposed to take place in England?
That's a good question. We never really get to see any references to where this is. I think this is one of those plays that could be anywhere. Yeah. They do mention the wife of the chief of police, but I think this was mostly supposed to sound like one of those black and white, because it's visually black and white. All the outfits are black and white, and people's faces are powdered white. I think it was supposed to be like a hard-boiled Chicago.
That's what I was thinking too. And at story. One time they called Santana like the Big Apple.
Yeah, and they also use words like honey child and stuff like that. They use these mannerisms and these expressions that seem like it would be almost an American location. Yeah. So that's where I visualize this happening, like on the streets, on Skid Row somewhere,
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too.
Doug was Philip, Clive was Leroy Santana. Pete Atkins shaved his beard and played Rambo and Michael Cage. Lynn Darnell, who was later Doug Bradley's first wife, played Lady Pearl Duval.
And Philip Rimmer. And she played Elizabeth Vanderberg.
Oh, so she also played the same different women.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And then Philip Rimmer played Billy Fizz, which is the sidekick to Santana.
And he played Jackson, who was the sidekick to Vanderberg.
Holy moly! So there was only like 4 actors for this whole play.
Yeah.
Wow, that's real economy. Yeah. Wow, way to go, guys. Real economy there.
Yeah.
And poor Fizz, he keeps getting his hat thrown around and stepped on. And it's like, he's like one of those sidekicks that's a real brown noser.
And Jackson gets convinced to take his clothes off, right?
Yeah, there's a picture of that here in the pictures in the book. There's a picture of Philip Rimmer taking his clothes off because he's playing Jackson when he's getting high on dope. He goes a little nutty. I could see this entire production pivots a lot around this idea of 2 people with the same face playing different characters. That's really, really clever.
Yeah. And also sort of then makes you wonder, are all of these characters supposed to be like the same person? And that would be really fantastical if that were the case.
Sure.
If Elizabeth was the same person as Lady Duval.
There is a little bit of a feeling that something is magical when, after both men meet each other, Philip and Santana, and they start talking about, at that point, they know each other already exists because of all the characters that have been coming up to them and saying, no, you're Philip. And it's like, no, I'm Santana. Yeah. No, you did this and that. I saw you. I talked to you yesterday. Or you chased this woman around to her house and knocked on the door. It's like, I didn't do that. I didn't see them for 2 days.
Yeah.
And when they finally meet, they realize, oh, there's another person that looks just like me. But it's like a creepy kind of doppelganger, right? Because they even have the same body morphology. They also have the same
scars and stuff.
Scars and moles and shapes of the moles and down to the hair. So that's where it becomes clear, that there is a bit of the fantastic here, because they start talking, hey, maybe we could, switch places. And at one point,
same number of missing teeth,
even, right? And then one says, well, maybe if I knock a few more out of you, people will know the difference between us. It's like, well,
Or maybe if you do that, your teeth will fall out.
Right. But since they're both similar looking, they look the same, they have this threat looming over both of their heads all of a sudden, which is the guy who wants revenge, Michael Cage, who wants to kill him. And he says, well, if he kills me, he kills you, right? Like, they start talking about this weird connection, like almost like a voodoo doll connection. Yeah. Like if I go down, you go down. Like people will say, this guy looked just like that guy, and they'll become a stain on you that you can't wash. And at one point, Santana even mentions, when he kills me, it'll hurt you too. And it's like, imagine speaking in front of the Senate, and all of a sudden your shirt rips open and your lungs fall out because Michael slashes my chest. And they kind of get into this weird mindset that, yeah, we must protect each other, right? We're almost the same person. So,
and that kind of goes into this more philosophical bent of the play that there's not. Clive had mentioned this in the afterword, that there's not really a one world of the law-abiding citizens and another world of the criminal. That it's
all the human world.
Yeah, it's the human world. Everybody lives in the same world, and they're not so. And politicians and crime bosses aren't so different from each other.
Yeah, you see that also in the part where Philip starts to prepare himself for the fact that Michael might come after him if he finds him, thinking he's Santana. Yeah. And he starts actually wielding a knife and starts educating himself on, hyping himself up mentally to be like, well, if you got to do it, just walk over to him, stick the knife in him and kill him.
And twist it once to the left and once to the right. And
yeah, like you're opening a door.
Yeah.
I guess we did end up spoiling a lot of this, but that's fine. I mean, it's a theater play, and maybe you can put a little warning at the beginning that there are spoilers to the story.
Yeah.
And at one point after the actual conflict happens, right, with Michael when he comes across the two men, he doesn't really see Philip. He's more in the back hiding his face. And, the only thing I thought was weird is that Philip, being someone who speaks in the Senate and he holds political office and is a very important man, somehow he's managed to keep his face off of the news and off of the newspapers. And that's kind of strange, because to me, it would seem that he would be more well known in the city than actually Santana, right?
Yeah, and I think that part is a little bit of a, well, how do we make this work? How can you have these two people that are famous in their own ways and nobody knows? And it's like, well, he just never trades on his face because your face changes. And that seems like a little bit of a stretch, just to make the plot work.
He's a politician who says that you shouldn't sell your face.
Yeah.
So, okay, we'll figure that out. I mean, there are quiet, silent types in politics who don't really get out there too much. So there is that possibility.
Yeah, nobody really knew who Anthony Fauci was, right, until the pandemic started.
Right, but, he didn't really – he wasn't in politics. I mean, he wasn't really an elected –
He worked for the government, but yeah.
Sure, yeah, for the
CDC.
CDC, right, which is kind of an obscure, kind of like very unnecessary or in the shadows thing, because you only need it when there's a major outbreak of disease in the country. So that's the only time you hear about it. It's not unnecessary. I just want to stress that it's more like in the shadows, off the main spotlight. You only happens to hear about the CDC when there's a big outbreak.
It's not necessary for us to know all about who they are and stuff.
Right. Yeah. That's what I meant. It's not like a people elected body of scientists or anything like that.
Yeah,
they're appointed. At one point, when they finally meet each other, they start. At first, they kind of get a little bit of conflict, and there's kind of a scene where they mirror each other's movements, right? Almost like the old trick in the mirror, like they step forward, they step back. It's like,
Yeah, and then at that point, that's like the climax of this idea. Like, okay, now is this the same person, or is this two different people? And is he crazy? Is he looking in a mirror? And then that scene plays it out, and we find it out, which was neat. I like finding that out with the characters.
And since they decide to support each other, when the fight happens, the end of the fight of the play happens with the fight between Michael Cage and Santana. Santana was almost losing the first fight before the play starts because he stabbed Michael in the back when he turned his back on him. Michael had him overpowered. But in the second fight, he says, Cage says, "I'm not going to turn my back on you." And it's not so much that he does turn his back on Santana. It's that he didn't know that Santana had another counterpart watching the fight. So when it seems that Santana is losing the fight, that's when Philip steps in and says, hey, I'm not going to let you hurt him, because if you hurt him, you're going to hurt me.
Well, and Michael's attention gets really diverted a bunch of times in this fight, because you've got Elizabeth and Philip hiding in the off to the side, and they start talking, and then he starts hearing Elizabeth. He's like, "Who are you?" And he lunges at her, and then he lunges back at Santana, and that happens a few times. So it's hard to imagine how that happens. Like, if he's lunging at, it depends on where they are on the stage, right? I guess, because if he's lunging at Elizabeth, you'd think that would give an opening to Santana, to run over and kill him. But
yeah, at that point, Santana's already hurt, and his knife hand got sliced, so he's kind of laying on the floor.
And we find out that they're not interconnected in this way that they thought they were, right? Because it doesn't make Philip get wounds on his hands or.
Well, no, I mean, I didn't expect that to happen, but there is a moment where mentally Santana gets sliced, and Philip says, "Oh, I felt that," but it's like that. I felt that as in sympathy pain, right? It's like almost like he's got that thing in his mind, like.
It's like when you watch in Hellraiser when Larry gets his hand sliced on the nail. You can feel that, because that's the kind of screen violence that people can sympathize with, because that's real. I mean, that's like that kind of thing has happened to everybody.
Right, and I don't know how I would react if I found out I had a doppelganger, someone who looked just like me.
Yeah,
that would be very strange to deal with. I mean, when I was a kid, one time some other kid walked over to me and started calling me a different name, and I was like, well, I'm not that person. He's like, what? You're not so and so? I'm like, no. I was like, oh, well, I'm sorry. And then he walked away, and I always wondered, is there a doppelganger of me somewhere? Because this guy thought I was someone else, and maybe it was just some acquaintance of his he thought I was, but that always left that I think that's around the time. At the time, I thought I knew about someone having a double, not a doppelganger. I didn't know the word doppelganger, but I knew that some people have a double, kind of like David Boreanaz and Craig Sheffer.
Oh yeah,
where they look very similar to each other.
Right. And River Phoenix and what was the other one?
Or Daniel Radcliffe and Elijah Woods.
Yeah, right. Yeah, in all the crazy movies that they do now, I always have to stop and think, wait, is that Harry Potter or is that Frodo?
Yeah. It's interesting, but so they ultimately Philip links his destiny to Santana's by ending the fight, right? He ends the fight. He actually doesn't stab Michael in the back. He stabs him right in the front while he's confused, like, wait, so who are you? And it's like, a fair fight, right? I will not stab you in the back. I will stab you in the front. And in that moment of confusion, he just stabs him in the heart. And
in that moment, Santana and Philip get a little bit of each other, right? Because Philip is kind of lying there cowering and not doing any, or Santana's lying there not cowering, not doing anything, and Philip has suddenly, got this bloodlust on him, and he's this lust for this crime lord type of power.
Right. And they hint these things that both these guys, being in polar opposites in the morality spectrum, they all have their weaknesses inside where they desire to be something else. Like Santana is a big crime boss, but at the same time he sleeps sucking his thumb and crying in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
It seems like he really wants to give it all up to do something else. And at the same time, even though he's a bloodthirsty guy, but at the same time, the goody two-shoes Philip, who speaks in the Senate or whatever, his wife describes him as having a goodness without strength, right? So it's like he's got all these good words and all this like fancy, high horse lecturing and this pretends to be so good, but there's no strength behind it. So he's always he's like the person who's saying, we should do this, we should do that. But then he doesn't really follow through with that. And then once he kills Michael, it kind of unlocks something inside him. And that's the point of no return, right? That's the point where they both realize that, oh, okay, listen, we could switch places and make both of us happy, and we could become the same person in a way. Just whenever you need to be Philip, you'll be Philip. Whenever you need to be Santana, you'll be Santana. And then all of a sudden, Philip's like, well, no, wait a minute. No, I earned this, right? I'm the boss now because I used the knife. I killed Michael. I own this zone now. I'm going to be the boss.
And interestingly, I thought they were going to have a fight to the death at that point. But then what happens instead is Santana is saying, all right, fine, you take it. But now I'm taking your life and your wife. And he's like, oh, no, you don't. Those are mine. And so they argue for a while, and then they come to this realization that there's a little bit of each of them in each of them, and that they can kind of swap back and forth, and they can organize their lives in a way where they can both have both parts.
And they also agree to tell each other everything about their lives from childhood.
Yeah.
So it's like the two sides of the same person are finally accepting each other and coming together.
You were talking earlier about this person that recognized you, and it made me remember that when I was in first grade, there was a little girl that looked exactly like me.
Uh-huh.
And people got us confused all the time, and people thought we were twins.
See? Yeah, there's always someone there who looks kind of like you, I guess. It's inevitable.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I liked this play. I mean, I think that if I were to rank them, it's no Frankenstein in Love or History of the Devil. Those are amazing to read, and this one has some neat ideas, and it's fun to read, but it's not like as big and powerful and epic as those plays.
Yeah, so it says also in the afterword, I think you brought this up earlier, that this was one of the first plays from the Dog Company that did not rely so much on the clown characters of the Commedia dell'arte. Like you said, maybe that's why Clive wasn't so much invested into this, if he said that in the afterword.
But for him not being so invested in it, they performed it a lot of times. It was like 19 times or something that they performed it from 79 to 80.
Well, it is a good play, and it is very, very mainstream. I mean, it is a play that, like I said, I read it very quickly because it's mostly all this dialogue. And I also think it's very well constructed because there's always a connection between each scene. There's always a character left on the stage from the scene before, and then another character comes in, and they talk, and then the character leaves, and then another character comes in, and they get some more information. So the conversation kind of keeps going all the time. There's a few monologues. So even Clive says at the beginning that these are not plays with a fourth wall. So the characters do monologues, and they're mostly for the audience, right? They're mostly to represent their internal mental state or mental struggle or, what they're thinking, because nobody stands in the middle of the street talking to themselves about, I feel this way. Maybe I should do this. Maybe I should do that. Yeah. So clearly that's the artifice in theater to let the audience know what the character is considering.
Right, yeah. Kind of like stage whispering, right? Everybody would be able to hear that in real life.
Yeah.
I was happy to get this play and happy to, having read about it, in those books that you talked about, Shadows in Eden and what was the other one, The Dark Fantastic. Having read, and also in Memory, Prophecy, and Fantasy Volume 2, right? That it's mentioned in that one as well.
That's right. They mentioned that
series by Phil and Sarah.
Right. They mentioned that in the afterword by Phil and Sarah Stokes that you can also know more about this on Memory, Prophecy, and Fantasy.
Yeah, and so I highly recommend anybody that's really diving deep into Clive Barker, like we have over these years with this podcast. Go get those books, the Memory, Prophecy, and Fantasy books, 1, 2, and 3 on the Clive Barker Archive. Definitely get this Nightlives book and all the playbooks, because that's a whole series of as everybody's always like, oh, when is Abrat 4 going to come out? But there's other things. While you're waiting, read these biographies, read the plays, get the Imaginer books, right?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So, Clive Barker's output is slowing down, in these years, and that's okay. But there's lots of stuff you can deep dive into.
Yeah.
Without just being impatient for the Book of the Art, Volume 3 or whatever.
Yeah, which, apparently it's all drafted and stuff. Yeah. Hey, I just remember there's another story that Clive Barker wrote for the Books of Blood where the doppelganger theme comes around, which is Human Remains, right? With Gavin finding
the vampire artifact thing, right?
Right. When he finds that weird wooden carved statue in a bathtub, and then that starts taking his form, even his scars, all that stuff, and tries to take up his life, and even goes to talk to his mother, and he just kind of fades away.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought about that story a little bit as I was reading this.
I would have loved to see the production of this play. I think it would be very interesting. It would probably be about maybe a couple hours, something like that.
Yeah, and really sparsely dressed set. It seems like it would be an inexpensive play to put on. Yeah,
it wouldn't need too much, because it's so simple. Or you can also make it gaudy. You can have fine sets and all that stuff.
Yeah,
but,
I guess it's open. There's not a lot of stage direction in this, so
that's right.
It's more open to the director's interpretation. It also reminded me of the story The Prince and the Pauper.
I'm not familiar with that. What's that like?
That there's a prince and a poor person, and they look exactly the same, and they decide to switch lives for a while.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I looked it up, and there's a Prince and the Pauper by Mark Twain, so that's probably Mark Twain.
Okay, maybe it is Mark Twain.
Yeah, so that's interesting, because they also switch places here. The poor boy goes to the court, and they start thinking he got an illness they call memory loss, and they think he's going crazy. That sounds interesting. I should probably look into this children's book.
Yeah, and it's based on this idea that that a rich person feels trapped, and they envy the freedom that poor people have, but then the poor people envy the obvious, like, riches and easy life that the rich have.
So go to the Clive Barker Archive, and if you go to the store, you can see the book there for sale. Nightlives is $10. And it ships from England, so it might take a little while to get it.
And it was put out at the same time a month, maybe 2 months ago or so, at the same time as the Frankenstein in Love volume, and that is an amazing play. And we bought that, and we didn't really talk about it that much because we've already had a whole episode about Frankenstein in Love. It's also included in Incarnations, so that's why we didn't. Why we're talking about Nightlives, because that's the first time this play has been published.
If you'd like, I can go grab the play script and we can discuss a little bit about the pictures that appear in Frankenstein in Love.
Yeah, I was just looking at this very first picture on 147 of the costume test for El Coco.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for people that have read the book or heard our episode about it, if you don't remember, El Coco is the Frankenstein monster.
Right. He's the flayed man. He's the revolutionary guy who walks on hot coals without getting burned.
Yeah.
So there's some amazing photos here. Of course, these play scripts, the best thing about them, apart from the play, is really the academic style afterward that Phil and Sarah always put at the end, with more story, chronology, details, quotes from people about them, and some critical interpretation of the play. And then you have the pictures, because they should have included these in the other playbooks, Incarnations and Forms of Heaven. I would love to see those, but now with these play scripts, we'll be able to see that pretty soon, I guess.
I like the way that Phil and Sarah are doing these. I mean, those other books are great too, but the way they're doing these is that you get each one is dedicated to one individual play. And so not only is that great for collectors that we can have a whole collection of each play and see all this neat supplemental material at the end, but it's practical for people that want to put on these plays. They can buy these books for all of their players.
And they're so accessible. because the Incarnations and Forms of Heaven has been out of print for many years now.
Yeah,
and these are,
like
Nightlives is $10 and Frankenstein in Love is $13.
Yeah. I would love to see a production of one of these plays. I know you saw the Naked Theater, right? Or Nearly Naked Theater?
It was Nearly Naked Theater in the Phoenix Theater. Yep.
Yeah.
And I saw History of the Devil, such a long play. It's amazing.
Yeah, but that's a great play. Reading it, you just get enthralled and you forget how long it is.
I never did theater. I didn't have theater in high school, and I've never really acted anywhere. But I'm always amazed at some of these plays are so big. How can people memorize these long monologues? And basically the entire play, you have to know what the other person's lines are going to be like, so you know in context how to properly react to them. So how can people, like, History of the Devil is such a huge, especially for, the lawyers in the play and the devil and all the characters who come over, like, from the dead and the history of the world, to recite what happened to them when they met the devil. It's a lot to memorize. That is truly an art form, to be able to convey that with feeling and emotion and make it believable.
As I was reading this, I kept thinking, man, I would love to just try to put together one of these plays in Fairbanks here, and then maybe record it. Maybe I'd have a bit part just for fun.
Yeah, but Do you know people in the theater there?
Not really. I know somebody who does, but it's like
okay.
But I don't. I think it would be neat though. It's totally out of my area of expertise, which also makes it kind of exciting.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. If anybody listening to this is interested in putting on these plays, contact Phil and Sarah Stokes at the Clive Barker Archive. Yeah, just go to clivebarker.info or clivebarkerarchive.com. There's usually a contact form there. And if you're listening to this and you want to put on a play, let them know. I'm sure they'll be able to work with you to allow you to make something as with less a financial burden as possible.
I think it would be great to see more of these out there in the world. I know, of course, the entertainment like this is sort of hesitant, right, because of what's going on with the coronavirus and everything. But
I actually went to a concert last night. It was full of people. Right. It was shoulder to shoulder.
Was that Primus?
It was Primus.
Yeah.
They were playing their set, their personal set, the Primus musics and the songs, and then they played they covered the entirety of Rush's Farewell to Kings. Take care of yourselves, get vaccinated, wear a mask. We're almost out of this. I mean, right now I'm saying this as America's becoming more infections than ever, but
yeah, they just in Anchorage here in Alaska, they just decided that they're going to start triaging the people that they're going to help, the people that they think they can save in the hospital, and the other people that they think maybe they can't save. They're just going to have to not help them.
It's a shame.
There are so many people in the ER.
There was a man who was having a heart attack, and he was told by a few dozen hospitals that they couldn't see him because they were full. So he ended up dying.
Oh, that's terrifying.
It is, yeah. Well, ending this on a better note, I guess. We have plans for a fantastic Halloween month in October, right, Ryan?
Yeah. So we're going to have like in between episodes because apparently we don't do enough episodes already. We're going to have some little in between, October celebratory episodes with cool stuff, and then we're going to have a Halloween episode, kind of a roundtable thing that we're working on planning with some fun special guests and stuff.
Yeah, so watch out for those little features that we're going to put out as bonus episodes. They're mostly going to be scary stories, and you guys will have to wait to find out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But coming next, we're going to have some more news. We're going to have, actually, our very next episode is going to be Jericho Squad 77, and we're going to be talking about Illustrator 2 and a commentary. And originally, we had it planned for Mule Skinner Blues, but now I'm kind of starting to think maybe it's time for a commentary on Candyman. What do you think?
So this week on the 17th, I think it was yesterday. Yesterday was the 18th.
I think it was Friday.
Okay.
But if we can do that, I think that's a little more, or I guess it's more contemporary than like Muleskin or Blues. We can do that anytime. But Candyman is new, and people are talking about it, and I think that would be a fun one to put together a commentary for.
I will have to get myself a trial of HBO Max or something.
Well, let's see where it's at. Because I remember them saying that it was streaming, and I'm pretty sure that it's on like the ones where you can pay to rent it, like Apple and Amazon.
So here's what I found. So on the CandymanMovie.com website, it says right here, on demand now, and it lists the places where you can watch it. It says rent on Prime Video, get it on Apple TV, Xfinity, Vudu Fandango. You can rent it on YouTube. There's also a Microsoft logo here. And let me click on more ways to watch. Looks like Redbox.
Those are all places where you have to pay extra.
Yeah, and the cable providers also have the movie for rent, apparently. Verizon, DirecTV, Cox, Dish, Spectrum.
That sounds expensive.
And AMC Theaters On Demand. Apparently, AMC Theaters now have an on-demand streaming platform. Okay, they got to make money, right?
Yeah, I can't imagine that anyone's paying for that.
Let's get people to sign up to watch the movies at home and not come to our AMC theaters. I guess they're making money anyway. Who cares, right?
All right, So Candyman, we're really considering putting this together. It's just going to take a little bit of logistical stuff, but that might be coming up soon. And this podcast, having no beginning, will have no end. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have subscribed. You can find the Clive Barker Podcast wherever you find audio. Show notes for this episode, as well as news and reviews, can be found at our website at www.clivebarkercast.com. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial podcast and blog that is not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Inc. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans. Watch for our annual Kickstarter fundraisers to get some cool stuff, and you can buy t-shirts on our TeePublic store. Go to tpublic.com and search for BarkerCast.
Thanks for listening.